Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for the Untangle 101 webinar series. Today we'll be discussing Untangle's NG Firewall product and how it can help in many different networking scenarios. So if you are unfamiliar with Untangle, then this webinar is perfect for you. My name is Shannon Bonfiglio. I'm part of the marketing team here at Untangle, and I'll be your host today. I also have our sales engineer, Chad McNaughton, who will be taking us through the presentation and also giving us an in-depth demonstration. Just a few housekeeping rules before I pass it over to Chad. Please be sure you are selecting the correct audio preference. On the right-hand side, you'll see an option to dial in. If you do decide to use the phone, you will need to input the access code. Otherwise, you can use your computer audio. And as always, we have a few staff members on hand to help answer questions. So in the Q&A box, if you have any questions that come up, please just submit those. If you have a very specific question or support question, please email us at support@untangle.com or sales@untangle.com. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Chad.
All right, thank you, Shannon. As Shannon said, everyone, this is an Untangle 101 webinar. So if you're already very familiar with Untangle, if you use Untangle daily, this is most likely not the webinar for you. We're going to cover a lot of stuff that you've seen before. As you can see on my screen here, we're going to talk about some cybersecurity numbers in the small to medium business sector. And then, as Shannon mentioned, we'll go through and show you some of the software and how it looks and feels on our demo server. So the SMB cybersecurity opportunities have kind of exploded here lately. Cloud adoption has changed network security landscape drastically for SMBs. It's doing a lot of things like centralizing services, reducing cost, and we're able to help with a lot of that stuff. The long and short of it now is that SMBs are suddenly targets. This is not anything specific to SMBs necessarily. It's 2018, and basically we're all targets now. So if you do have a small business, even with 5 or 6 employees, you could actually be a target for hackers, for malware and ransomware, things like that. Excuse me. SMBs are becoming aware of this, obviously. It only takes a few ransoms to make the news before small businesses realize that this is a problem in their industry. So as a small business, one infection could bankrupt you. You know, it could put you out of business. So this is a very I guess it's a very serious aspect to your network security solutions, but it's getting scary, I guess, for SMBs specifically, because large enterprises have always been targets for these kinds of attacks, but now SMBs are as well. The main disadvantages for small businesses are that they lack resources and expertise. Not all small businesses even have a dedicated IT person, for example, let alone a dedicated network security engineer. So this is a very daunting thing. This is a huge undertaking, it seems like, for a small business. If you're a small business owner who is good with computers and you've set up your own router and things like that, it can seem overwhelming to try to put something like a network security solution in your environment. So it can also feel very cost prohibitive. The bad news is it is in a lot of markets and with a lot of other companies. Untangle has a lot of really interesting cost reducing things, and we're still Untangle. So we have free apps and discounts for nonprofits and things like that. So as you can see on my screen, about 50% of SMBs have experienced an attack at this point. 70% of all of these attacks are targeting SMBs now, with 60% of SMBs going out of business within 6 months of an attack. That's from the National Cybersecurity Alliance there, you can see on the graphic. So these numbers are startling to me, and this has changed so much over the last 2, 3, 4 years that it's gotten to a point where it's no longer okay to not know about these things if you're a small business owner or even a network admin at a medium-sized business. So to introduce you to Untangle, we'll talk about some of our features here, and as I mentioned, we'll go onto my demo server and show you some of the software. So Untangle is a little bit of a different animal. This is what's called a Unified Threat Management Device. This is a UTM. It's not just a web filter. It's not just a firewall. So this is comprehensive Unified Threat Management for small, medium businesses. It's quick and easy to deploy and manage. So easy to deploy, our hardware, your hardware, virtual cloud, and easy to manage now through Command Center, which is our cloud-hosted centralized management. So with Untangle, you get a low-cost subscription-based software solution that is actually available on a small to medium-sized business's budget. As I mentioned, we do have a lot of interesting discounts. There's always, specials that Shannon will mention later, trade-ins, coupons, stuff like that. You can save costs by leveraging your existing hardware, like I mentioned, or you can get a turnkey appliance from Untangle, one of our resellers. Untangle's already installed, and then all you do is pay for subscriptions. This can be a very easy plug-and-play setup and deployment. With Command Center, this is getting very interesting as a turnkey appliance because you can create a template configuration, for example, and apply it to other devices. So Command Center is where you'll see your fleet of Untangles, and you can manage them all through our cloud with real quick remote management from a tablet, a phone, whatever you need. There are multiple channels of support. A complete package or a live support subscription gives you phone support with our team here in Colorado, but we also have our wiki, our user forums, which are incredibly active and very helpful. There's also the YouTube channel where all our tutorials and webinars are uploaded, Spiceworks, lots of channels of support for Untangle users. This is also going to offer you these proactive actionable alerts and notifications, as well as historical reporting. Untangle's reporting is extremely powerful, which I'll show you here in a minute. Untangle can retain up to a year of reporting data locally. Obviously, that will depend on hard drive size, but we can also offload those things to keep for your permanent records. So if you want to store them with syslog server or in Google Drive, we can always offload those for safekeeping. And then we also do offer advanced remote support, as I mentioned. If you have that live support subscription, that gives you access to phone support with our techs out here in Colorado who just won an award for us, another big award they won. And then with Untangle on the network, there is a bit of a seamless transparency because your end users don't really know Untangle's there. Unless they really have to sign in to a portal or some sort of authentication for VPN, they don't know we're there. Untangle is either the edge router or in transparent bridge mode behind the router, and it's a basic pass-through to filter traffic. Untangle is an inline appliance. It cannot be a proxy. And so because of that, we're going to sit between your local network and your router, the internet, et cetera, and just be kind of a transparent filter. So it's a very, very interesting solution because it's inline, but it also is available for cloud management, centralized management, things like that. So just to go over a few of Untangle's products, we actually do offer a pretty wide range of products. The Untangle NG Firewall platform is our basic software platform for deploying these security and policy applications. The apps themselves are what you would subscribe to. So whether you're doing a few applications or a complete package, that's where your subscription is going to come into play. Our applications inspect traffic simultaneously and enforce rules at the same time. So this is called virtual pipelining. A lot of other devices like this, the applications, the filtering, it'll be sort of an assembly line, and it will take a packet of information, a little bit of time to go down that conveyor belt of traffic inspection. With virtual pipelining, all of Untangle's apps pile onto a piece of information at the same time and scan it simultaneously. So if one of those apps sees a problem, it catches it right then. So it's a really interesting thing. It speeds things up. It makes Untangle run a little smoother. And then as I mentioned, the reports are live, customizable, or enable you to drill down into a user's traffic to a specific site from a specific mobile device, all kinds of information. Some of the features here that you'll see on my demo server are basically, as you can see color-coded here for different functions of the software. So under the protection section there, you see firewall, intrusion prevention, virus blocking. When you see under the filter section, web filter SSL inspector, those are two that we would talk about pretty extensively if we were going to go real deep into filtering the internet. Because so much of the internet is encrypted with HTTPS now, we would require SSL inspector to decrypt that. Untangle's apps, which you see listed here, virus blocker, web filter, bandwidth control, application control, these apps can only see HTTP. This is by design, obviously, HTTPS is encrypted. So SSL inspector will decrypt that to HTTP, and then all these apps can pile on. And you see under add-ons, we also offer branding manager, live support. Branding manager lets you basically rebrand the Untangle interfaces with your own logo if you're an MSP, a reseller, that kind of thing. And then we also have a lot of flavors of VPN now. So whether you're needing, remote access for road warriors, they just need to log in from their phone or laptop. We could use OpenVPN if it's multiple sites that need to connect back to HQ, we could use IPsec VPN or maybe Tunnel VPN, which is part of our new SD-WAN solutions. So some really interesting things, a lot of products that maybe you don't think of when you hear Untangle, because most people still consider us a content filter or just a firewall. So to deploy Untangle, as I mentioned, lots of options. The software itself can be installed on a lot of different devices. I can say just about anything. We've only found a few devices that are truly incompatible. This is Linux Debian. So if you have hardware that's compatible, if you find network adapters that work with Linux Debian and give you your full bandwidth speeds, then that's great. You can absolutely use that. So whether you're buying an appliance from us, using your own, going virtual, or using something like Amazon Web Services to run Untangle in a public cloud, we have a lot of ways to deploy the software. I just mentioned the virtual pipelining you see on my screen. So it's not proxy chaining, like I said, no assembly line. And the hybrid cloud product mentioned right above that is basically a very good description of Untangle now, because it is at its core an on-premise inline appliance. So if you have a physical box, that box is on-premise in your data center, your server room, whatever. But that's actually connecting to Untangle's cloud for things like virus telemetry data, malware information. And it's also connecting to Command Center, where it's giving you reports and it can alert you to certain conditions, things like that. Both of those options, virtual and public cloud, let you have a lighter hardware footprint. We can run real minimal on real small hardware. You'll see our X series. That's a new line of hardware that runs really, really, really low wattage and are cool. Those are really interesting little devices. They're heat sinks, and they even have Wi-Fi. So whether you're looking into our hardware, your own hardware, some spare hardware in a closet, virtual or public cloud, we do have some documentation on our site and on our wiki where you can see specs. You can go look at our appliances specs to kind of match those up on your own, or just to see which one from Untangle would be most applicable for your network. So I mentioned Scout IQ. This is Untangle's cloud-based threat intelligence. So this is actually aggregating telemetry data across Untangle's from around the world. This is never on by default. You always opt in to connect to Untangle's cloud during our installation wizard. So if you opt in, what you're doing is you're making your Untangle visible to your command center in the cloud, and then you're also allowing it to share information to and from Scout IQ. So this is going to identify threats in the wild quicker than something like an endpoint could, or even our locally installed Bitdefender with Virus Blocker. What this is doing is taking information seen from one Untangle somewhere on a 0-day type basis. So if an Untangle in Belgium sees a piece of malware that's got a known signature, but for example, has a new exploit tied to it, that exploit is new information and it has telemetry data, and that gets uploaded into Scout IQ. When that's done, it's analyzed, and then if it's valid, that's basically downloaded to all the other Untangles that connect to Scout IQ. So it's a really interesting service, and this is included at no additional cost. This is part of both of our Virus Blocker services. So if you have Virus Blocker Lite, even, you can connect to the Scout IQ scan. And I did mention Command Center. This is the other aspect of Untangle's cloud infrastructure. This is basic centralized management. There are requirements for full remote management here. We have an article on our support knowledge base that describes the eligibility requirements. If your Untangle has the complete package installed, it's eligible for full remote management. That's one of the main conditions. So this gives you access to your fleet of Untangles. So multi-site deployments, you can just jump into a box. You can see aggregate reporting on a dashboard, a quick threat history, any audit logs, so you can see who has logged in to the servers for different sites. This is also now where you manage all licensing, software updates, configuration backups, etc. A really interesting aspect to Command Center is that you're able to create users now. So if you are, for example, an MSP, a reseller, something like that, and you have technicians who need access to Untangle servers, we can create those employees as users here in Command Center. And all they'll have access to are the servers that you grant them access to. When they log in, they won't see your account. They won't see your subscription information, your billing information, no credit card numbers, things like that. So it's a very handy service if you are someone who has multiple employees who you delegate admin services to. This is also handy because you can manage licensing and updates here. The really key part is these backups. Being able to have a backup to push across other devices. The next option you see down, clone, edit, and push policies across your fleet. These are kind of tying together as we're finally getting to a point where Untangle users can log in, create a template configuration in the cloud, and save it, and then push that to all their devices. So this is a really interesting aspect to centralized management. This is something people have been asking for a long time. Command Center has come a long way in a year. It won an award last year as well for best product. And I think that the changes that we've made here most recently are some of the best we've ever done. Things like just allowing users to be created, allowing policies and actual configuration backups to be stored here and then pushed to other devices. This is really just going to reduce overhead. Here at Untangle, we do have a lot of clients who are, for example, maybe a little library in rural America somewhere. They may have 3 other little library sites that could be 100 miles away, 2-3 hours away. Excuse me, that admin no longer has to get in their car and drive for 2 hours to the other remote site in case something's wrong. We'll be able to remotely manage those things and do that from a centralized hub. So this is a really interesting thing. Command Center is free for up to 5 eligible servers, and after that, there's a pricing structure that looks a lot like our licensing structure. And I've mentioned appliances quite a bit. We might as well take a peek at them here. These are Untangle's hardware offerings. So the new X series there on the left are the ones that I mentioned that I like so much because they are heat sinks, they're real low power, and they're newer hardware, and they're honestly really, really reasonable pricing wise. And as you see, the XW series there also features Wi-Fi. Excuse me. Whether you're looking into just getting a firewall, just standing up OpenVPN, or our complete package to filter every single packet coming through, these devices are going to simplify that process because you don't have to go download Untangle, put it on a bootable USB or a CD, install it on your own spare software or hardware. This is just the turnkey appliance option. So if you like, you can come to Untangle, look at one of our boxes. If you have, for example, 500 devices that need to be filtered, 400 devices, we would look at the U500. If you're looking at 100 devices, we look at the 150. So these are basically rated for number of hosts, active devices to be filtered. Keep in mind that we do license by unique IPs, but we can also institute bypass rules for things you don't want to filter. We automatically bypass voice over IP and DNS and PPTP. So keep that in mind. Printers, faxes, voice over IP, we won't want you to pay to filter that stuff because it won't need to be filtered. So when you're looking at device count, just keep in mind only the devices that need to be filtered. So real quick, let's jump over to my demo server. Let's see, I've got that up over here. This is demo.untangle.com for anyone who's bored, wants to play with Untangle. It's always live, there's no password. You can jump on and play around anytime you like. You'll see that this is actually installed in Amazon EC2. So we are running our demo server in the public cloud in Amazon Web Services. So it's a very stable build, and we do have options and documentation on that. So when you log into Untangle, unless you have a different URL bookmarked, this is what you'll see. This is our dashboard. By default, you'll see server metrics, you'll see policies, and you'll see geolocation. So this map is showing me the country codes that these sessions are generating either to or from. This is a very handy tool for things like geo-filtering. If you needed to, you could say, well, I don't want to deal with the sessions to or from Australia. Australia's country code is AU, so you could go into our firewall app and say, server country is AU, block it. No one on your network could then get to a server that geolocated to that country. So it's a really handy thing. If you click on one of these dots, it'll narrow down the sessions just to that country. And you can see pretty deeply into what that traffic looks like, depending on the number of apps installed. So the little map is actually really handy. It doesn't seem entirely interactive, but it's a very, very valuable tool there just at a quick glance. As we scroll down, you'll see we're looking at reporting info. So we're seeing sessions per minute here. I'm seeing top mobile applications being used. You can see there's Facebook looks like the winner there. So I might need to go block Facebook on mobile devices. This dashboard can really be anything you want it to be. By default, we show you these things because we think they're valuable. But if you don't want to see these, or if you, for example, leverage something like Active Directory or Radius for usernames, you can come in and disable anything you don't want to see here. So I mentioned Active Directory because I would go turn off host names widgets if I have usernames. So you can disable them or completely delete them. Then you just hit apply. The other thing we can do is come add the widgets we want. So if I did connect to my Active Directory, for example, I would want my username widgets. So all I have to do here is click this and add it to my dashboard. It'll throw it down at the top of my dashboard here, and then I can drag it around however I like. We can also change this default 1 hour of information to up to 24 hours. The widgets will display up to a full day of data. If you do want to see more than 24 hours, I recommend just going out and looking at the actual report, which you can do from this little box. So this is taking me to that report in my actual reports viewer here. So you can see Untangle by default, when you install all of our apps, have about 400 reports already built in, which is a lot, obviously. So while it may seem daunting, it may seem like a lot of information, it is, you can narrow that down quickly, just like I was doing over here. So if I just wanted to see the top sites being visited, there they are. So this is coming from my web filter app. We're able to come in and maybe remove some of these that aren't as relevant. So you can see DSL reports, there we go. So that's a little bit more relevant and applicable. So one of the main things I'm noticing right here is that the URL mobile.twitter.com is being hit. What that tells me as an Untangle admin is that they figured out I'm blocking the Twitter app on their phones. So they're using a browser on their phones now to go to the mobile Twitter URL, which I'll now go block in web filter. So thank you for the clue, and now I know what to block. This is looking at a day of information by default. This is where you change your date range depending on how much data you're retaining. As I said, we can keep up to a year locally. Then we can also customize these completely. So if you want to, you can come in and add conditions, change these around, what they look like. If you want to change that and save it as a new report, we can do that. We can also add global conditions right here if we need to. Oops, I'm sorry, there we go. Those same conditions are available right here just to quickly customize the report. And we can also just create a new report from scratch. If you're not seeing a report that you're looking for, don't get frustrated. Untangle support can help you either create one or customize one to get the information that you're looking for. So our reports viewer is extremely handy. Like I said, it can be basically anything you want it to be. By default, though, if you install our complete package, you'll get about 400 reports, and some of them are great, just by default. Our config menu here houses most of the basic layer 3 options for your network admins to set everything up. Some of this is going to depend on whether or not Untangle is in router mode or transparent bridge mode. In bridge mode, for example, we don't have the option to be a DHCP server. But this is where we can do things like static routes, layer 3 filter rules, like layer 3 firewall rules, natting, port forwarding, and the bypass rules I mentioned live right here. This is where you can come say, I don't need to filter this certain printer. And then we just throw in its local address. Well, if I can type, we would. There we go. So I leave that set to bypass, and now 192.168.1.12 no longer counts as an active host on my license. So you can do a range of IPs there. You can do comma-separated individual IPs. These are layer 3 conditions. So you could also say, we just want this entire interface bypassed. Maybe you have public Wi-Fi and you don't want to pay to filter BYOD. You can bypass the entire interface that the Wi-Fi access point is plugged into. So keep that in mind. Untangle always wants you to be able to filter the devices that need to filter, but then also leave the ones that don't need to be filtered alone. Once we bypass something, we can still control its traffic. We do that through quality of service. So this is where those rules live. VoIP gets a very high priority by default. We don't want your calls to be bad, but we don't want to filter VoIP traffic because it's not necessary. So that was a long, drawn out spiel about our licensing. If you do see, for example, 56 hosts by default on your network, I would almost be able to guarantee that we could probably get a few of those off the licensing and get you down under 50 devices, that kind of thing. So just kind of a pro tip to keep in mind. So what we're looking at now is basically the Untangle complete package. We do have 2 redundant apps installed in here for demo purposes. So if you install all these apps, you won't see Web Monitor here or Spam Blocker Lite. Those are both replaced by their full versions, Spam Blocker and Web Filter, which completely replicate all their functionality and more. For things like connecting to your Active Directory, creating different policies for students, teachers, employees, executives, etc., we would start with Directory Connector and Policy Manager. Policy Manager is where we create those groups. So you can see we have some policies set up as a school would here on my demo box. These are just sets of applications. These are indented below default because they're actually child policies. So these are inheriting all the rules from above. So you can see the apps are installed here for default. If we go to teacher, they look grayed out. So what that actually looks like, on default, all the apps are live and active. On teachers, they are physically grayed out and we can't access them, except Web Filter. The reason we can access Web Filter is because we came up here and we installed that app for the teachers. So keep this in mind as well. Your default policy can just be the baseline configuration, quote unquote, best practices, the minimum filtering that everybody gets. From there, you can create these policies and you can be as granular as you want. Within this policy even, I could be this granular about my web filtering. I have a teacher who's doing a report on social networking. That's an example I just made up, but we're gonna go with it. So our English teacher, Jerry Smith, wants to do a lesson on social networking in 2018, but we block all social networking, right? So I'm going to give just Jerry access to all this within the teacher's policy. So jsmith2, and what I can do here is get real granular. So if I wanted to give them specific websites, I could do that, but social networking is a pretty big umbrella. So I'm going to do the entire category. This is going to give them access to anything that resolves to that category. Things like facebook.com, twitter.com, instagram.com. But Jerry probably doesn't want to do this only on his desktop computer. So I'm also going to give him access to these mobile applications. And you may notice that I mistyped that. That's very on purpose because I know they spell it wrong. So in our application control signatures, some of these words are just spelled wrong. There's obviously plenty of room for that second A, but that's not how it's spelled in the signature. So I tend to copy and paste those from application control when I need to do this. But my condition is now done. So all this is going to do is it's going to say anytime jsmith2 authenticates with that username, they have all the sites that locate to web filters category of social networking, and they have all these apps that I'm punching in here. Maybe they also need Snapchat, I don't know. I leave this set to pass. I keep it flagged so I can get reporting on that traffic, and then I say done. So now Jerry's the only one out of all the teachers that has access to these things. So this is a really interesting thing we can do within a policy like that. So while I don't necessarily have to go make a policy for every single person anymore, I can just create quick little rules like that. I could have done that with multiple usernames, multiple devices, MAC addresses, whatever I wanted. The interesting thing about these policies is that I have been basically talking about doing this with Active Directory or username authentication, but that's not necessarily always the case. These conditions are very open. So you do see username here, and at the bottom you'll see user in group. This is where I would actually make this rule. So let's see. So if my teachers are in a group called teachers, anytime they authenticate through that group, their target policy will always be teacher policy. So it's that simple. But if we, for example, wanted to also give them maybe YouTube during their lunch hours on Friday, we could say from noon to 1:30 on Friday, they go to the admin policy where there are less rules. The policy creation in Untangle is really open, and there are a lot of conditions we can pull from in here that are really handy. We could even say all these MAC addresses, everyone using an Apple device, they go to a separate policy. The policy is where we put all the apps, all the filtering. So this is a real easy way to be pretty granular with Untangle, depending on your network. Not everyone has Active Directory, not everyone uses groups, but we have a lot of ways to do that. Even using manual tags from Untangle, we could tag devices as, Wi-Fi or as not safe for work, and we can leverage that tag to create policies. Once that's happening, we would basically go in and we would start filtering the web for them, right? We can do that with mobile applications if that's where you need to start. It might depend on the state of your network, whether or not you allow things like BYOD, if employees use their own devices, if you allow public Wi-Fi. Mobile applications may be extremely pertinent to you. Even things like proxy apps and VPNs, we can actually come in here and block or tar pit traffic. So this is very handy because a lot of apps that people will use to get around a web filter, something like a proxy app, let me get down to my proxies here, will actually have some extremely annoying behavior as an app. Because if we come down here to a proxy app, something like UltraSurf, and we try to block that traffic, UltraSurf will see that we're blocking its traffic and it will actually start trying to connect in other ways. So we would want to tar pit that rather than block it. Tar pitting it still blocks the traffic, but it doesn't tell the app or the user they're being blocked. So while we can do that on the mobile side there, we would also want to come into web filter and obviously probably start some category blocking. So filtering the internet in 2018 has gotten complicated. The adoption of HTTPS has been exponential over the last year and a half. HTTPS encryption in the United States has doubled since January of 2016. We're at about 80% full HTTPS encryption in the States now. So that's a great thing for internet users. It makes everything safer. It makes us able to bank online and still sleep at night, but it's making things a lot more hard to see. So what we would need to do to actually see into HTTPS traffic would be to enable SSL inspector and to deploy the Untangle root certificate to an endpoint. We could do that a number of ways, but this is what's called man-in-the-middle based deep packet inspection. So what we're doing is decrypting HTTPS down to HTTP so those apps can see it. These rules here, a dozen or so, are built in by default because these are extremely popular services that are all 100% HTTPS. Facebook is my favorite example because it's become fairly ubiquitous on the internet and it's hard to block. So this is a very simple looking condition. What it's saying is if anything comes across as HTTPS and the word Facebook is somewhere in those packets, Untangle will need to look at that traffic. So we have Facebook wildcarded between two asterisks here. And it's a basic, yes, we need to peek at that statement. So because of what I mentioned, 80% encryption on the internet, that makes inspecting all SSL traffic really, really impractical. There's never an Untangle installation that has this box checked by default. We don't recommend doing that. As I said, it's pretty intense. That would be a lot of stuff to scan. So we do inclusions. So if you needed to, for example, block Amazon's not in there. So we would do inspect Amazon. And there are a lot of ways to set these conditions up, but I tend to stick to these SSL inspector conditions down here that isolate it. So certificate subject is same thing, asterisk, zone, asterisk. Yes, please look. So with that rule, I'm able to block Amazon or to throttle it or to inspect it. If I want this to catch higher in the order, same thing, I just drag it up. So this is a very, very crucial aspect of content filtering. For Untangle or for any certificate-based decryption, obviously, we have to be able to decrypt HTTPS to HTTP. As soon as that's happening, thanks to our virtual pipelining that I mentioned, all of our apps pile on at once, and Web Filter will jump on and say, does that traffic meet the condition of any of these categories that we're blocking? This categories list is massive. There are close to 600 million URLs categorized in this database. The really interesting thing about this database, the part that I think makes it cool, is that this is not a signature set. This is not an access control list. We don't install this locally on your server. This is a cloud-hosted database from our provider that does real-time lookups. So if I'm on your network and I go to twitter.com, it does a real-time lookup and it says, what is twitter.com categorized as? Social networking. Keep in mind that one URL can be in up to 3 categories. So this one is in 3. So maybe you're blocking streaming video. That would block ESPN.com. You might not want to block sports or news, but you're blocking that. So what we would need to do is just whitelist ESPN.com. We do that right here on our past sites, and we do the same syntax matching if we want to wildcard that. So past sites is your whitelist, this is your blacklist. Past sites is going to supersede all blocking anywhere on Untangle. This is where we can also come in and create different rules like I was showing you to exempt Jerry from filtering that the teachers are getting. This is also where we can do some filtering based on DNS. So server name indicators are basically host names, and this is not a complete method of filtering HTTPS anymore because of everything I've just mentioned. So this is handy for certain devices that won't receive a certificate, things like IoT devices, newer Android phones, stuff like that. We can still do some DNS filtering here and block their content. We also on this page enforce safe searching. This does require SSL inspection. Like I said, that rule we saw in there that inspects Google will actually decrypt a Google search to HTTP, and then we can enforce safe searching on those results. My big red letter warning right here is that yes, we do a very good job enforcing safe search. Untangle, however, does not define what is safe. So keep that in mind. If something comes through, that's usually a Google problem, a Microsoft problem, whatever search engine you're on. But we do a really good job of enforcing that. We can also do things like restricting Google apps. If you're on a Google domain, we can restrict that to your domain. And we can also give a temporary unblock to a web page. You can require a password. It's basically a kind of a personal whitelisting thing for employees, users. A couple other things I just wanted to touch on here on our apps menu before I take some questions. I get asked a lot about our virus blockers. People see these two here and it raises questions, which is fine. Excuse me. So let's answer those questions real quick. Virus Blocker and Virus Blocker Lite are pretty different. Virus Blocker Lite is open source. It's our free version. And this runs Clam AV. So Clam Antivirus is open source and community maintained. Both of these apps have the same exact scan options. They scan the web, they scan port 25 email, and they scan FTP. They have the same pass sites put in by default. We don't scan Windows updates for viruses. And they have almost the same advanced options. You'll see that Virus Blocker Lite here even does that Scout IQ cloud scan for Untangle's telemetry data. That's no additional cost. Like I said earlier, this is all part of our free virus blocker. But if we go here to the full version, you'll see that for one, this installs Bitdefender. So this runs the Bitdefender virus set. Installs that locally here on your box. This thing just updated about an hour and a half ago. I think it does a couple of those a day now. The same scan options, same pass sites, but on the advanced tab here, you'll see we do the Untangle Scout IQ scan, and we also do a Bitdefender cloud scan. So this is accomplishing a few things. For one, it's antivirus at your gateway, which is becoming, to me, pretty crucial for protecting your network. Endpoint antivirus is no longer good enough by itself. Untangle's antivirus doesn't replace that. You should always have endpoint antivirus on your machines, your web root or your Malwarebytes or whatever it is you use. Untangle will have Bitdefender at your gateway and in the cloud. So what we're doing here with these file extensions is scanning them for infections before they get to your network. So a good example is an Excel spreadsheet right here, because they're pretty well known for being able to host malware and things like that with an infected macro. Excuse me. What we're doing here is we're trying to take end users out of this equation. This may not be the thing you wanted to hear early in the morning, but your end users, your employees, your students are the problem with ransomware and malware, and they're always going to be. And I think Untangle is a great solution at your gateway, but this is, to me, one aspect of what should be a multi-layered approach to antivirus in your organization, on your network. User education, to me, may trump even antivirus. I'm a former teacher and a former network admin, so that kind of hits me, right in my wheelhouse. But if your users don't know that they're being targeted, that's a problem to me. Everyone's a target these days, like I said. So even Untangle, as a little company, we do phishing exercises and things like that. Even in a little company like Untangle that works in this industry, we're a target, and a lot of us are very techie people and admins and developers, but some of us aren't. So that's still very valid for us. You're doing user education. So I think that's a very, very important aspect to antivirus and protecting yourselves against malware and ransomware. I feel like almost all organizations now, whether 5 employees or 5,000, should do, at least quarterly user education for things like phishing and spam and malware. What we're doing here, though, is killing this file before it gets to someone in an accounting department who always opens spreadsheets. So we're doing our best to take them out of the equation for you, but I still feel like that's a very important aspect of antivirus in 2018 is user education. That being said, I've basically covered most of the apps I wanted to get to here. So let me jump back over to our slide deck real quick. I want to go over a few key differentiators between Untangle and some competitors. We've basically gone over a lot of this through the webinar up to now, but officially, we are built specifically for small to medium business deployments. I think that's a huge difference in this industry because we provide that enterprise level security, but consumer level usability, ease of use with the dashboards. And to me, a lot of people hear Linux Debian, and they instantly picture a command line interface. And I understand that, that's what we're all used to, but this is Untangle. This is all completely graphical UIs. So it is built for simplicity. But a big deal to me is that we are an SMB built for SMBs. As I said, this is browser-based, completely responsive admin, some of the best reporting you'll ever find. And like I said earlier, our default settings are actually tuned intelligently to real world use cases. So if you go through the Untangle installation wizard, you'll choose recommended apps to get our quote unquote best practices. We do have extremely comprehensive bandwidth shaping capabilities like quota management, penalty boxes. If you need to put a quota on a username, if my friend Jerry Smith there only gets 200 megs a day, we can do that. And then we also do automatic seamless upgrades. So it's always going to be up to date. There's no downtime. You don't have to log on and update it if you don't want to. And you can schedule those out. Untangle version upgrades are always free. We don't charge for new versions, anything like that. So because this is a software-based solution, it can really be deployed anywhere. Like I said, your hardware, ours, VMs, clouds. And we do actually have a freemium suite of software. So if you download Untangle, like I said, it'll put you on a 14-day trial. Then at the end of that trial, you'll revert to our free package. That 14-day trial is our complete package with live support. I can't overemphasize how great it is to have full live phone support during your 2-week trial. You can get every single thing fixed and working like you want before you ever spend a dime on Untangle. Then your configuration is already saved and you apply your licensing, you download your config and you're up. So I also mentioned, this is cloud-based centralized management. You get on the box reports, so none of that's an additional cost. Reports is free, intrusion prevention is free. We have a lot of really interesting aspects to that freemium suite. And then if you want, you can always add different paid apps a la carte, or you can go to the complete package. Just some recent recognition, some community notes. It's Untangle is not new. Untangle's in its 15th year as a company. As you can see, we're kind of winning a lot of awards here lately. This is a really interesting company to me. We're a real small business. There's about 50 employees, something like that. But we're doing things like this. So whether or not you have heard of Untangle or you're just brand new, you can kind of rest assured that we are established, our software is stable, and we're a very up and coming company in the Valley. You can see if you look at spiceworks.com, we're actually really active on Spiceworks. They voted us the best software firewall and best content filtering appliance. I'm our brand rep on Spiceworks. If you're a user there and you ever have a question, you can just type the word Untangle into your comment and it'll ping me and I'll jump on and answer you. Along those same lines, we do have a lot of case studies on our site now, on our YouTube as well, video case studies. If you're you know, an organization like one of these, a school district, you know, a county government, you can always jump on Untangle's website, untangle.com. There's a resources page with our case studies, user testimonials. Those are also available on our YouTube. That being said, Shannon, do we have any questions that are hanging out there waiting on answers?
Yeah, we've had a good amount of questions, a lot of specific questions, but some people were asking kind of how they can get started. You mentioned the device count, so I figured, you know, we might as well talk about the licenses and where you can buy and get pricing and
Sure.
everything.
So if you'd like, let's just jump over to untangle.com here real quick. Another of my favorite aspects about Untangle is our transparency. There's not a lot of companies in this industry that let you just click a button and see the retail price of their products. You usually have to go through some sales folks. So keep in mind what I was saying about licensing. This is my complete package here. You can always come create your own package, see the pricing for everything. You can also throw hardware here or our professional services. This is where we determine your device count. So if you have 50 PCs to filter, but you plan on buying 10 more in a month, I would probably tell you to start it up to 75. But it's really easy to upgrade this stuff in the software. So the licensing, you just log on, you click upgrade, it shows you a price, a difference basically, and it prorates you, lets you choose a renewal date. What I always try to get right in pre-sales as a sales engineer is your hardware or virtual machine. So I'll also show you real quick the Untangle wiki site. So this is wiki.untangle.com. If you are just getting started, this is actually where our installation guide is, our user guide, and our performance guide. So those are all very useful for getting installed on your own hardware, virtual machine. And then down at the bottom here under hardware requirements is our real handy little table of specs. So whether it's physical, virtual, cloud, these are still very valid. If you have 212 devices to filter, I would tell you to go at least 2 cores. So if you get your box, your virtual machine built, from there, all you have to do is go over and download Untangle. As soon as you download this, that starts the clock on your 14-day trial. So keep that in mind, and then you'll be able to enable all those apps. It'll look basically like my demo server did, and then you'll be able to really test. But the important documentation for getting started is at wiki.untangle.com. This is where the installation guide is. It'll walk you through everything. This is basically going to show you how Untangle will look on the network if you're going to choose router mode or bridge mode. So we have a ton of resources out there. Wiki.untangle is one of the best ones. Did I answer that question, Shannon?
Yeah, that was great. Someone's asking if it's by user, and it's by IP, so any IP.
Yeah, so that's what, yeah. So the technical term, the actual licensing golden ticket term, is that we look at unique concurrent IP addresses that are passing traffic. So if you have an IP on your network that's passing traffic, that becomes an active host. So keep that in mind. That's what I was saying earlier about the bypass rules. So if you're seeing 80 hosts on your network, maybe take a closer look at your DHCP. You'll see maybe 20 security cameras. That changed your licensing drastically. You know, if you're only going to, you know, need to filter maybe 40 or 50 rather than that 60 or 70. So yeah, it's not users. Users is to us basically 1.75 IPs to 2 IPs now. So keep that in mind. Yeah, it is IP based active hosts.
Great, thanks, Chad. Someone's asking, you know, the difference between free and complete version, and you know.
Great. That's an easy one. I like it. So over here on Untangle's site, you can come to software packages. And this is actually a side-by-side comparison. So you can see basically what's free, you know, it denotes that right there, but it also has a little check mark. So if you want to drill into any of these, just click on it. That'll take you to the products page. But this is a quick breakdown of everything that's free versus paid. And then all these paid apps are available individually, including live support. You can actually get that by itself if you want to. That's under NG Firewall and software packages. Let's see. All right. Any other questions, Shannon?
Yes. Someone's asking about, let's see, software, using the software or using it as a hardware solution. I recommended reaching out to sales, as your network environment might depend on that.
Sure.
But maybe you can kind of go over some of the hardware requirements if they want to use their own or software version.
You bet. So that is kind of a big question. It always comes down to your organization and your network, because what if there's a Dell PowerEdge server sitting on a shelf in your closet that you didn't know was there? So it's always a personal choice or a budget choice. So there's no difference in the software. If it's our hardware or your hardware, to be honest, we don't care. I like it when you buy our hardware. It makes it easier on you. You get a hardware warranty, it's pre-installed, all that stuff. You get support on the hardware. But this is Linux, and I'm very aware of the Linux community's love of DIY. So that's fine. If you have a box or you like playing with hardware and you want to build it and try to get it to work, I absolutely encourage that, and I want you to report your results back to us on the forums. We're getting into some really interesting things now with the hardware and the software, different firmwares. I run Untangle on a little Linksys router at my apartment, and we're pushing for different hardware all the time. So we rely on our community a lot, excuse me, for things like custom hardware updates and the idea of getting it to work on something like a Raspberry Pi. FYI, if someone gets that to work, I demand you post it on our forums, because I want to know how. That's the one I want. But it's a big question to me, because it always comes down to, number one, the budget. Is a piece of hardware from Untangle in the budget? If it is, to me, that's a better option. I'm still kind of an old former admin, and I love the idea of a public cloud. It reduces cost, but it's also just someone else's server. We have this word cloud that I love that is very ubiquitous, but those are just servers at someone else's data center. So to me, that's a little more hands-off approach. If you're a hardware person, you would absolutely probably want to at least get one from us or build your own to have something on premises. So it's excuse me, it really is coming down to, I think, how your network is dispersed and your budget. But if you have a hardware guru, for example, at your organization, and someone just likes building boxes, I would say, if you want to, you can come in and, for example, if you have 100 users, you can come look at Untangle's U150's specifications. There aren't a lot of, I guess this isn't, a NASA supercomputer here. Look at this. It's 8 gigs of RAM and a Pentium dual core, for 150 devices. So just keep that in mind. Our boxes are smooth and they have Untangle pre-installed, and these are the 150 and the 500. Those are two of the best servers I've ever found. I've seen one that was up for 5 years without a reboot. I don't recommend that. It's just the record I've seen. So I feel like that's not a very good answer, but it does come down to personal choice, taste, and most often budget. That's why spare hardware or a cloud virtual solution can be so handy. Maybe you guys already run Windows Server and you're using Active Directory. Well, Hyper-V is included for free on that Windows Server. So maybe you run Untangle and Hyper-V. So there's a lot of ways to do it. If you do have real specific questions about your needs and your actual layout on your network, yeah, definitely contact us, support@untangle.com or presales@untangle.com. If you have something like a network diagram that you can fire us over, we can give you a really, really specific answer. X marks the spot. Untangle needs to go here, whether it's ours or yours. That's kind of up to you.
All right, thanks, Chad. We're kind of running short on time, so I want to wrap this up. I know there were some other questions about some installation and stuff, so please reach out to us at sales@untangle.com or support@untangle.com if we did not get to your question, want to have more in-depth conversation. Chad did mention some promotions. We do have these promotions going on. These are more for people who may already have us, or you're using us at home and want to bring us to work. We do have special pricing for that. But if you are using Untangle, already, or have an older appliance like Chad mentioned, and you want to get a new one, or you're not sure if it's working great, you can trade in and trade up. Or if you have a competitor's product, you can trade that in or call us to see, what would work for you and best in your network environment. We do work with partners and MSPs. Please contact us at sales@untangle.com, or you can check on our website. We do have a partner program under the partners tab. So sorry, I don't mean to cut this short. I know I see a bunch of people coming in with questions, but we are at the hour mark. So please, like I mentioned, if you're not sure how Untangle can help, or you want to just kind of get started and get a little bit more info, or get a more in-depth demonstration for your network, Chad, or some of our other sales engineers are happy to set up a more specific demo for you. So please just reach out to us. We're here. We also have a wealth of library information on our website, the wiki, the forums, in our support channel. So thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate everyone's time, and thanks, Chad, for the great demo. Appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.